One of the next major battles was the Battle of Trenton, and this one actually has this very famous picture that goes along with it here. So, what happened with the Battle of Trenton is you had two armies that were camped on opposite sides of the Delaware River. The British were on one side, the Americans were on another. It was Christmas Day. Conditions were horrible at the time. Most Continental soldiers were ready to quit. They had given up. They decided it wasn't worth it anymore. It was cold. The river was icy. Like you can see the chunks of ice floating in the river. Um, Real windy. It was a time when everyone wanted to kind of hunker down and stay safe. So the Hessians were on the other side of the river. Hessians were actually German soldiers who were hired by the British to fight for them, to help supplement their army, make sure they had a stronger army. So the Continental soldiers were on one side, Hessians on the other, and they said, "It's Christmas, conditions are bad, we're safe, we're fine. Everybody stay hunkered down, stay warm." Well, on December 25th, 1776, George Washington and the Continental Army said, "No, this is our time." They got in this boat and they rowed across the Delaware River into New Jersey and had a surprise attack. And the Hessians were completely unprepared. They didn't even have a lot of their weapons handy, and so they surrendered pretty quickly. As a result, there were very few casualties in this attack. The Hessians had 22 deaths and 83 injuries, and the Americans had 2 deaths and 5 injuries. Like, for the most part, nobody was ready, and it just was over. What it did do, the Americans were able to capture about 1,000 Hessians. So that meant that Britain lost 1,000 soldiers, plus the ones that died or were injured in that battle. So it was a surprise attack, and this famous painting has been around for years. I'm sure you've seen it on several things, but it is George Washington looking all heroic as he rows across the Delaware with his men ready to attack. Next is the Battle of Saratoga. This happened on October 17th, 1777, and it is what we consider the turning point of the war. So, the plan for Britain was to divide and conquer America. Some of the troops were going to come from the north, like Canada, some would come from the south, and then they would meet up in the middle. If half of them took over down south, the other half took up over up north. When they meet in the middle, they've conquered all of America. This plan would last for several months. It had several battles that were a part of it. Saratoga is just one of the more major ones. Um, at the time of this battle, Americans were starting to feel pretty defeated and hopeless. They had actually lost Philadelphia. It was their capital, and it had been captured by the British. And they didn't see much hope in continuing the battle. It looked like they were going to lose. But during this battle, it kind of went awry. Um, some of the British troops didn't follow their orders. They went elsewhere and didn't meet up where they were supposed to, and it left the remaining British troops unprepared for battle. So 86% of British troops were captured at Saratoga. And this is exactly what Americans needed. It gave them confidence and encouragement. They suddenly realized, hey, maybe we can do this. But more than that, it gave France confidence because at the same time, Benjamin Franklin was off in France trying to convince them to send allies to help us. And France wanted to see some sort of proof that it would be worth their while. And they didn't want to send their men in if they were just going to be slaughtered. And when they saw this, they said, you know what? These Americans maybe can do this. And they went ahead and joined up as allies. It's important also that you understand what Valley Forge was. It was not a battle, but actually a campsite. So the American Continental Army camped for the winter of 1777 through 1778, several months. And this is where kind of the war continued to turn. It's where most people say American forces became a true fighting unit. So they call this the birthplace of the American Army. It's where they got their training, they learned how to work together. It's located in the southeastern corner of Pennsylvania. It's not far from Philadelphia. And the spot was chosen by George Washington because 25 miles to Philadelphia was not that far by horseback. And that's where the British were staying. and that's where they were camped out. And so George Washington wanted to make sure that he could keep an eye on the British. He could make sure that if he wanted to attack or whatever they were up to, he could see. But if they tried to attack, he would have enough warning to get his men ready. So he had three major leaders that helped him there. Obviously, there was General George Washington, then General Friedrich von Steuben, and General Marquis de Lafayette. He's the one from France that came over and worked for free. And a neat thing about the Marquis de Lafayette is conditions were horrible at Valley Forge. In fact, there were 10,000 men who started the winter there, and 6 months later, about a fourth of them, 2,500 men, had already died just from cold weather and disease. And the generals would have been given like their own tents, and they would have had special conditions. They would have had better clothing, all sorts of stuff. And the Marquis de Lafayette refused that. So he was working for free for the Americans and said he didn't need any special treatment. He was there to help. So it's important that you understand that Valley Forge is really where the American Army um, became tough. They got their best training and they prepared to get ready for the rest of this war.